spend a lot of time getting ice into the house and beer.
Are you a big beer and ice fan?
No, but before I go to sleep, I like to drink a vodka or a whiskey or something.
Right. I like a whiskey. So a similar bubble could be the hype about medical cannabis companies in Canada and the US. On the other hand, more and more countries are talking about legislation. You are living in Thailand and the government is planning to open soon. South Korea opened already. The market is huge. How do you see this investment opportunity?
Well, if you look, say, at the dot-com bubble, a lot of companies went out of business or the stock went down and never recovered fully. Cisco never recovered fully, and Intel briefly recovered, but just briefly. But the point I want to make, you will have thousands of companies that are in that industry, cannabis, and maybe 10 will do very well, and the rest will not do so well. And a lot of companies will go out of business. A lot of companies will be taken over. So what I hinted at before, the selectivity will be very important. Say, if in '99 you invested in a basket of NASDAQ stocks, the high-tech, media, telecommunication, most stocks lost money. But all you needed is one, Amazon, to do very well. After 2000, the peak in 2000, Amazon went down 70%, but then it recovered and made new highs and has been a very good investment. So I think if you take a long-term approach to the sector, I tend to think that there is a huge opportunity lying ahead. But as I said, it's like in mining. Most mining companies that are listed in Vancouver, they go bust, maybe 95%, or they'll never make money. But all you need is one that makes money and it can go up a lot.
And so how long have you lived in Thailand now?
Well, I lived 30 years in Hong Kong and now almost 20 years in Thailand.
Wow. And so what would you say are the biggest financial differences between Thailand now and Hong Kong potentially in its peak?
Well, Thailand is a completely different society than Hong Kong. One of the advantages of this country is it has a lot of land, and there will never be any starvation in Thailand. But that's also a disadvantage because it doesn't give people a very strong incentive to work. You understand? If someone works and suddenly doesn't feel like working tomorrow, he just goes home and lives with the family on the farm or in very simple conditions, but he'll survive.
And he's happy.
Because we also have here a society that shares. If you go somewhere and people are eating, they will immediately offer some food to you. Hong Kong is a city without anything at all. The water has to be imported, the oil has to be imported, any appliance has to be imported, and so forth and so on. Wine has to be imported, whiskey has to be imported. They basically don't produce anything, but it's a trading center. It's like Monaco. Monaco doesn't produce anything, but it's a center. It's a convention center. It has a F1 race, and Hong Kong has lots of conventions and more because now Chinese companies, they like to have their conventions or conferences in Hong Kong. So it's a totally different environment from Thailand. And I also have to say, you know, there is this big discussion in the world about the evil white man and colonialism. But say colonialism in the last 50 years was very different than in the 19th century. So Hong Kong was a colonial city owned by the British until 1997. But the British in Hong Kong were not pushing down the Chinese. On the contrary, under the British, people thrived, like also in Singapore. And so Hong Kong then became part of China, but they still have a lot of autonomy, although maybe in time it will be a Chinese city. But now they have this project, the Great Bay Area. And this is going to be a huge thing because it will be Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Macau, Shenzhen all together. That will be a region with a GDP larger than Australia.
Wow.
Yes, I think the potential is actually quite good. Now, if you ask me about property prices in Hong Kong, they're very high. Yes, I agree. They're too high. But equally, because of the low taxation in Hong Kong, it's the same low taxation in Monaco, essentially keeps property prices very high because people with money, they like to stay in a low taxation area and they avoid idiotic locations like France and New Jersey and California where taxes on individuals are very high. They just leave.
Interesting. So, just to go into Thai freeze dry is a freeze drying organic herbs. Thai freeze dry is freeze drying organic herbs and prepared for the stock market listing at Vancouver and Frankfurt Stock Exchange in 2019. At the moment, Thai freeze dry is building a new facility for high quality and high efficient CBD production. What do you think? Could the health industry and alternative medicine move as the next super trend?
Yes, I think if you look at the drug industry, it's a very questionable industry. I mean, it's like the food industry, Monsanto. All these industries eventually become like a mafia organization. And the pharmaceutical industry, they have basically no interest in healing you. They want you to keep on buying the drugs for the rest of your life. You understand?
Yeah.
The most important in life is a repeat customer. If you're a whore, you want a good customer that comes for a long time to you. Yes, to find each time a new one is a higher risk. So you want repeat customers. Every brand knows that. And so I think that the drug industry gradually will become very controversial, like the food industry, this whole GMO and the pesticides and the insecticides and so forth, that come under a lot of pressure. And now we've seen it in America with Johnson & Johnson, and especially Purdue, who produced opioids. This is a poison. This is not the drug, but it's been sold as a relief. And I'm sure it offers some relief, but it also makes people dependent. And that this was allowed to happen is incredible. But I believe that people, and as you know, Chinese medicine is largely based on natural medicine. Like also the natives in America, we used to call them Red Indians, but that is politically no longer correct. So the natives, they used also herbs as a medicine, and in some cases quite successfully. So I believe that anything that is natural will become a big industry if it offers some relief.
So
And I think this whole cannabis medically has a lot to offer.
So on that respect then, obviously a lot of the nations with temperate climates, do you think that they're scared of, let's say, tropical climates such as Thailand?
Well, that I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. I live here essentially 30 meters from the river. The other house, the living house, this is my office, the living house is on the river. If you grow something you can grow a big tree within 3 years. I mean, we don't grow the trees anymore because we have large trees. Actually, we cut them down. But then they grow again very rapidly. It's amazing. You can shave them off and they grow again right away. But my neighbor across the river, he planted some trees maybe 2-3 years ago. They're large trees already. I mean, this is an incredibly fertile region, the north of Thailand. Incredibly fertile.
That's wonderful. So commodities like precious metals and agriculture are assets you often mention in your TV interviews.
Yes.
When the central banks don't even talk about their M3 anymore. The balance sheets in the central banks and BIZ, the central bank of the central banks, are fully confused. Which asset classes do you recommend investors to go forward for, especially in this multiple bubble situation we're in right now?
Look, I wished I knew exactly which would be the best in the next 10 years. But let's face it, I think most markets are one way or the other manipulated, either by central banks through interest rate policies. And the interest rate policy of central banks can have a huge impact on the value of the currency. So the last, say, 18 months, the US dollar has been strong. But maybe in the next 5 years, the dollar will be weak. You just don't know. But traditionally, historically, gold, silver, platinum have been a fairly good investment, but also volatile. And if you own gold and precious metals, you have no cash flow. That you have to understand. You own something, but it doesn't create cash for you every year. If you own a property, a rental property, it will create some cash flow every year, provided it is rented out. You know, that is a big if, because we don't know. Maybe in future, locations on main streets will not be very desirable, who knows? So, and offices may change the way people work, maybe they work from home, who knows? There are lots of things we don't know about the future and how society will look like, and now we have this really dumb trade war. This is now really a dumb idea, because the global economy is already weakening rapidly. I think a lot of countries are already in recession, if you measure it properly. By the way, also Thailand, I think there's no growth. I mean, I lived here, as I told you, almost 20 years. I've never seen Chiang Mai this quiet. This is the low season, May, June. But even within the low season cycle, this is one of the worst. I was in a high-end restaurant the other day, and I thought, you know, I asked once because we know the owners, and the owner's wife just came by and she was talking to my wife and so forth. And then I asked her, how is business? And she said, it is about down 30% from last year. And last year was worse than the previous year. And this is confirmed to me by everybody. Business is way down. And I go every day for a cocktail to a bar, and I can see from that bar the whole street. And there are lots of bars there. It's extremely quiet. But I mean, really extremely quiet. And I look at the traffic, because I drive to the city from here, which is only about 7 minutes. But I always drive around the same time. You can see the traffic is incredibly light right now, even for the low season. So superimposed on a weakening global economy, which is undoubtedly the case, you have now this trade war that if you are an entrepreneur and you have to make $1 billion worth of capital spending decisions, where are you going to put your factory? In California, Mexico, China? You don't know. Because we have a clown in the White House, I would have voted for him because I couldn't justify voting for Mrs. Clinton. But basically, he changes his mind as often as he sends out a tweet. And he's very inconsistent. And I think that this then retards capital spending decisions. I mean, a good example is we had this issue about infrastructure. Infrastructure, everybody will agree, has to be improved in the US. But now the Democrats and the Republicans can't agree on the infrastructure spending because Mr. Trump links it to the immigration. So how are you going to get to anywhere under these conditions, and the economy will continue to deteriorate? I think if you look at the bond market recently, everybody was bearish about US bonds last October, November. Now, at the time, the 10 years yield almost went to 3%. We're down to close to 2%. We had a very strong bond market rally. The long bonds rallied more than 15% from the lows 6 months ago. So that tells you something about the economy. You look at the oil price, down, tells you something about the economy. Lumber, down. Most real estate is no longer going up. A lot of real estate is down significantly. Not a little, significantly.
So would you, if in regards to property, would you recommend people to go for commercial buildings versus private?
I think raw land is quite good, in my opinion. But in absence of knowing how the world will look in 5 or 10 years' time, I would tell any investor, look, you better diversify. You own some stocks, you own some bonds. Maybe you think that bonds are unattractive, but as I explained, under certain conditions they could be attractive because you lose less money. And you own some real estate and you own some precious metals, and you take a joint once a while to enjoy the decline of the Western world.
Thank you very much for the interview, and we hope to invite you to meet the Hill Tribe farmers and also the Thai freeze-dried facility.
Yes, I hope that I can taste this stuff.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been lovely speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.